Michael Jordan. The name alone carries weight. 6 championships, 5 MVPs, unmatched ferocity, breathtaking artistry, a competitive spirit that reshaped the laws of gravity itself. But behind that blazing legacy lies a truth not bright but brutal. A father stolen from him in a cruel moment. A brother in spirit lost to tragedy. Heartbreaks that left scars no trophy could ever redeem. This is the story of a man who transformed pain into purpose, rejection into dominance, and loss into a legacy that'll echo forever. If you believe Michael Jordan is the most powerful legend in sports history, don't forget to hit like. Because what you're about to hear is the complete story. Not the highlights, but the heartbreak that built the man. February 17, 1963, Wilmington, North Carolina. Inside a small home held together by love, discipline, and relentless work, Michael Jordan was born. His father, James R. Jordan Sr., labored as a mechanic and factory supervisor. His mother, Dolores, worked at a local bank. No luxury, no privilege, only responsibility and the expectation that every child would fight for their place in the world. Michael grew up in constant competition with his siblings, especially his older brother Larry, who beat him in every backyard game. For years, Michael lived in that shadow, wondering if greatness lived only in others. Their father pushed him harder than the rest, extra chores, higher expectations. But beneath the discipline was an unspoken bond. James would kneel beside him after losses and remind him that setbacks were teachers, that he mattered. Then came 1978. At just 15 years old, Michael stood in a crowded hallway at Emsley A. Laney High School, staring at the varsity basketball list tacked to the wall. His name was not there. He walked home slowly, each step heavier than the last. In his bedroom, he broke. "When I got cut, I went home and cried," he would later admit, voice trembling with the pain that still stung. That night, his father opened the door, sat beside him, and reminded him that every great man rises from rejection. And in the dim light of that small bedroom, Michael picked up a basketball and began to dribble. Each bounce echoed like a vow. What followed was transformation forged in silence. He woke before sunrise. He practiced until sweat blinded him. Pain became discipline. Rejection became fuel. Humiliation became hunger. Between 1979 and 1981, he rose from the boy who wasn't chosen to a force that scouts across the country could no longer ignore. In the fall of 1981, Michael arrived at the University of North Carolina as a skinny freshman, swallowed by the scale of it all. At night, his dorm room felt colder than Wilmington, and when doubt twisted inside him, he called home. His father's voice reminded him to breathe, to fight, to trust the fire within. Dean Smith's practices were unforgiving. Precision, discipline, obedience. Michael wanted to explode, to take over, but Coach Smith forced him to slow down, to learn, to wait for his moment. Then came March 29, 1982, the NCAA championship game against Georgetown, the final seconds. The ball swung to him, time fractured. The Superdome lights dimmed into a tunnel. His heartbeat thundered like drums in a distant war. He reached for the one instinct he had learned to trust, rising with a shot so perfect it felt whispered by destiny. Swish. The net ripped open, and with it, the ceiling that had held him down since childhood. Years later, he would say, "That shot gave me the confidence to be Michael Jordan." Everything changed after that moment. The overlooked freshman transformed into the player every scout chased. And in June 1984, the Chicago Bulls selected him third overall. Michael signed a 7-year, $6 million contract that would reshape the NBA. He stepped into the professional arena carrying the echoes of every fear he had conquered and every lesson Dean Smith had carved into him. By 1991, Michael Jordan was no longer just an electrifying young star. He was a man reforged by humiliation, carved by discipline, sharpened by hunger so fierce it felt almost dangerous. The years of torment under Detroit's hammering fists, 3 straight eliminations, the countless dawns spent training alone under fluorescent lights, all of it pressed against his chest like a storm begging to break. When the Bulls met Magic Johnson's Lakers in the 1991 Finals, the world saw it. The vengeance in his eyes, the astonishing grace of each mid-air twist, the refusal to bend for a second. Chicago erupted. Michael had answered with thunder, but glory demanded everything. The march through 1991, defending it at 29 in 1992, and the final push at 30 in 1993 was lined with empty gyms where he pushed through burning lungs while the city slept. 3 championships in 3 years. A three-peat so rare it felt carved from myth. And beyond the court, another empire rose with him. Air Jordan. What began in 1985 as a risky sneaker experiment now towered over America like a new religion. The Air Jordan Y alone generated more than $30 million in its first year, pulling in more revenue than entire companies. Every release sparked lines around city blocks. Every commercial rewrote fashion and aspiration. These weren't just shoes, they were wings, symbols of flight, grit, and the belief that greatness could be laced onto anyone's feet. By the summer of 1993, at just 30 years old, Michael Jordan stood on the highest ledge an athlete could climb. 3 consecutive titles. Unmatched fame, a cultural impact that transcended sport itself. But at that altitude where the air thins and the lights never dim, a different kind of weight began to settle. The weight only legends know. Then came July 23, 1993. His father, James R. Jordan Sr., his anchor, his mentor, the man who recorded every milestone with a camcorder in hand, was attacked by strangers while resting in his car. He passed away shortly after. When the news reached Michael, it didn't arrive as words. It arrived as collapse, as silence, as a world shattering beneath his feet. In the days that followed, Michael moved through a fog of disbelief. He replayed their final conversation over and over, searching for hidden details that might ease the breaking inside him. At the funeral, when Michael laid his hand on the casket, witnesses said his shoulders trembled. Not with the power that once carried Chicago, but with a sorrow so human it brought veterans and strangers to tears. His mother reached for his hand. For a man built on unshakable confidence. The loss of his father felt like the removal of the ground beneath him. "My dad was my rock," he said quietly. But the truth cut even deeper. James wasn't just his fan. He was his foundation. The steady voice behind every triumph. The unseen force that shaped the man beneath the legend. By October 1993, the grief had hollowed him. The interviews, the packed arenas, the nightly expectations, all of it felt meaningless in a world without the man who had celebrated every step of his rise. On October 6, 1993, Michael Jordan stepped in front of microphones and announced his retirement. Global shockwave followed. The greatest player alive was walking away at the height of his power. not because his body failed him, but because his heart had been broken beyond repair. Then came the decision that baffled millions: baseball. His father had always dreamed of seeing his son play baseball professionally. So in 1994, wearing number 45, his childhood baseball number, Michael joined the Birmingham Barons. Dawn after dawn, he arrived before the sun rose. His hands blistered from gripping the bat. His jersey clung to him like a second skin. The bus rides were long. The hotels were small. Laughter from critics echoed louder than cheers, but he pressed on. Every swing, he admitted, was a prayer for my father. Through cold mornings in minor league stadiums, through isolation of unfamiliar hotel rooms, through longing that never loosened its grip, Michael began to feel something stir inside him. Not the fire of competition, but the gentle pulse of clarity. He carried his father's old camcorder with him, sometimes setting it beside his locker, as if its silent presence might steady him. On quiet nights, he would sit alone, staring at an old pair of Air Jordans he once gave his father, remembering the way James smiled when he held them. Slowly, he began to understand what his father had always seen in him: not a basketball machine, but a man capable of rising again even after the deepest break. And on March 18, 1995, after 17 months of searching for himself in the shadow of loss, Michael Jordan sent 2 words into the world that thundered louder than any headline in sports history: "I'm back." No press conference, no theatrics. Just a whisper powerful enough to shake the planet, carrying the weight of grief, the strength of healing, and the echo of a father's belief. Chicago didn't just welcome him back. The entire city exhaled after 17 months of holding its breath. When reporters asked why he returned, Michael paused, looked down, and said softly, "I needed to feel like myself again." But the truth was deeper. He was coming back because basketball was the only place where the pieces of his soul still fit together. The only place where he could still feel close to the father he lost. The first weeks were brutal. His rhythm faltered. His timing lagged. But every time he stepped onto the floor, there was a flicker, a tiny spark of the fire that once burned down arenas. He stayed late after practice, shooting alone, until the lights inside the United Center flickered like tired stars. He rebuilt his strength through hours of solitary, punishing drills that would have broken most men long before sunrise. Then, as the 1995 to 1996 season dawned, everything clicked. The rust fell away. The instincts sharpened. The hunger returned with a vengeance. At 33, Michael Jordan led the Bulls to a staggering 72-10 record, the greatest regular season in NBA history. June 11, 1997, the flu game. He woke with a fever near 103 degrees, barely able to stand, dehydrated. Drained before the game even began. Doctors urged him to stay in bed. Coaches told him to sit. His body begged him to stop. But Michael stepped onto the court anyway, each movement heavy, as if he were dragging the weight of memory and loss behind him. He bent forward in pain. He fought waves of dizziness. At one point, he whispered to Scottie Pippen, "Just stay close." And still, as he had done since childhood, he refused to break. He scored 38 points, stumbling into Pippen's arms when the buzzer sounded. That moment, the greatest player in the world leaning on a teammate just to stand, became one of the most enduring images in American sports history. It wasn't a game. It was a lesson carved into the heart of a nation. Greatness isn't defined by how high a man flies, but by how fiercely he rises when he can barely stand. By 1998, at 35 years old, Michael Jordan stood at the fragile edge of a dynasty. Teammates aging, the front office fracturing, the league evolving around him. The end was coming. And yet he carried himself with the calmness of a man who understood that legends do not wait for perfect moments, they create them. Game 6 of the 1998 NBA Finals, the score tied. Seconds draining away. Michael dribbled right, crossed left, and stepped back with a glide so smooth it felt whispered by destiny. The ball rose, a slow, perfect arc suspended between noise and silence. Swish. Time stopped. It was the last shot. A masterpiece that ended the Bulls dynasty, secured his 6th championship, and sealed his name forever as the greatest to ever touch a basketball. But behind the trophies and glory lived a man confronting a truth far heavier than any championship. In the late 1980s, when Michael was still climbing toward the summit, he met Juanita Vanoy. Their early love lived in small cinematic moments, whispered conversations in dimly lit restaurants, hands clasped in quiet cars, dreams traded in soft hours before dawn. When they married in 1989 at just 26, Michael believed he was stepping into a future built not on fame, but on forever. But fractures in a marriage rarely begin with earthquakes. They begin with hairline cracks no one notices until the light hits just right. A missed recital because of a road game. A holiday interrupted by interviews. A goodnight kiss given over the phone because he was in another city, another arena, another obligation. As Michael's career exploded into global myth, the world pulled at him with greedy hands. Sponsors, fans, cameras, expectations. Juanita found herself raising 3 children, often alone, guarding the home while Michael shouldered the weight of a dynasty and the unrelenting attention of the world. They still loved each other, but the space between them stretched wider with every season. The tabloids circled, magnifying private uncertainties into public spectacle. By the early 2000s, the distance had grown into a canyon, not carved by anger, but by years of slow, silent drift. In 2002, after 13 years of marriage, Juanita filed for divorce not as a strike of anger, but as the final act of someone trying to preserve dignity before the walls completely crumbled. The process stretched 4 long years, turning their quiet heartbreak into national entertainment. Headlines speculated. Strangers debated. Their most private pain unfolded under a spotlight neither wanted. When the divorce was finalized in 2006, the world focused on the staggering $168 million settlement, one of the largest in American history. But money was never the real story. The truest, deepest moment was far smaller. Michael stepping out of the courthouse into the cold Chicago air, realizing that for all his rings and records, there was one loss greatness could never undo. The loss of the home he once believed he could protect. Yet even in the aftermath of devastation, something profoundly noble emerged. Michael and Juanita refused to turn their wounds into weapons. There were no public accusations, no televised battles, no bitterness sharpened for the world to consume. Instead, there was respect, deliberate, quiet, steadfast. They rebuilt as partners in the legacy that would outlive them both, their children. In the years after the end of his first marriage, Michael faced nights alone, rooms that felt too big, and the slow work of rebuilding a life when the noise of the crowd no longer followed him home. He had lost his father, then his marriage. For a while, even the sense of who he was outside the roar of arenas and the weight of expectation. So when love finally crossed his path again, it did not crash like a thunderbolt. It arrived like a whisper. Her name was Yvette Prieto, a woman who saw not the billionaire, not the global icon, but the man standing behind all that noise. Their first conversations were soft, almost careful. Two people stepping gently through the ruins of their past. Michael was in his mid-40s, old enough to know how fragile promises can be. What grew between them wasn't the wildfire of youth. It was a warm, steady flame between two hearts trying slowly and bravely to believe again. For a man who once feared he might never trust love after losing so much, that quiet warmth felt nothing short of miraculous. When they married in 2013 in a sunlit ceremony in Palm Beach, Michael was 50, an age when most men look back at what they've done, not forward to what they might still build. Yet that day, under vaulted ceilings and surrounded by family, he looked at Yvette with a gratitude that said, "Thank you for giving me a second chance at something I thought I had already lost." When their twin daughters, Victoria and Isabel, arrived in 2014, their home bloomed into a kind of joy he had not felt since his older children were small. He had missed so many of those moments the first time: games, flights, press conferences, endless hotel rooms. Now, with a second chance placed gently in his hands, he whispered a promise to himself: "I won't lose this one." He turned his phone face down more often. He stayed home a little longer. Through the slow creep of age, the reality of aches and checkups, the pressure of business, and the shadows of a past filled with heartbreak, they found a rhythm that worked. Imperfect, human, resilient. Michael rarely speaks publicly about this chapter, but his life tells the story. He appears less, rests more, chooses privacy over spotlights. In the peace of his Florida estate, he has become a man no longer defined by how high he can fly, but by how faithfully he can stay. He learned slowly, painfully, beautifully, that the truest form of greatness is not measured in rings or records, but in the courage to love again after being broken, to show up when staying is hard, and to build a home where laughter outlasts applause. But before that peace arrived, Michael faced another heartbreak. In the shadowed years after his father's death in 1993, someone stepped into the emptiness, not as an employee, not as security, but as the steady force who refused to let sorrow swallow him whole. Gus Lett, a former Air Force veteran with a voice as calm as a prayer and a presence as solid as granite. Gus became the man who guarded not only Michael's body, but his spirit, the quiet protector who stood where a father once had. He was there in empty hallways after games. He was there on late-night flights. He was there during family gatherings, positioned like a silent shield, ensuring safety and peace. "Gus helped me breathe again," Michael once admitted privately. But in 1999, Gus was diagnosed with lung cancer. Instead of stepping back, Michael stepped closer. He paid for every hospital visit, every medication, every treatment. He sat beside Gus during chemotherapy, sometimes holding his hand, sometimes recounting stories from practice, just to pull his friend's mind away from the pain. Nurses whispered that Jordan never visited like a celebrity. He visited like family. In February 2000, Gus passed away. When the call reached Michael, the ache tore through him like the first loss all over again. At the funeral, Michael's shoulders trembled as he whispered, "Gus was there when I needed someone the most." Michael covered all funeral expenses and continued supporting Gus's family for years, discreetly, respectfully, without fanfare, because loyalty was the only way he knew to honor love. And then came January 2020, Kobe Bryant. Not just a superstar, not just a former rival, but the closest thing Michael ever had to a little brother, a mirror, a student who became the purest reflection of his own fire, was gone at just 41 years old. With him was his daughter Gianna, only 13, with her father's fearlessness stitched into every step. Their relationship had never fit into a single word. Kobe wasn't just another young player chasing greatness. He was the one who chased Michael without fear. In the late 90s, Kobe would call Jordan at 2 or 3 in the morning, hungry to learn every detail: footwork, mindset, leadership, how to live with pressure, how to live with pain. At times, Michael was the teacher and Kobe the student. At times, they were rivals, but they were always brothers. Kobe later said, "I don't have a mentor. I have a big brother." While Michael called Kobe "my little brother." When Kobe died, Michael withdrew from the spotlight, carrying his memory like a candle he refused to let go out. He became a quiet guardian of Kobe's legacy, speaking of him with pride, carrying his name with care. Because for Michael Jordan, this loss was losing a piece of himself, a reflection of his own fire in a younger body, a living reminder that even the brightest stars are not promised time. And in accepting that truth, he showed the world something deeper than any championship, that even the greatest of legends can break, can cry, can ache over a future that should have been. Right now, at 62 years old, Michael Jordan stands as far more than a basketball legend. He stands as a living testament to what a human being can build when discipline meets purpose, when heartbreak becomes fuel, and when a vision refuses to die. His estimated net worth of $3.5 billion is not just a symbol of wealth, but the architecture of a life forged from grit, precision, and unshakable mastery. Every part of his empire reflects decades of reinvention: athlete, icon, owner, investor, cultural force. His primary residence in Jupiter, Florida, sits inside the ultra-exclusive Bears Club community, a custom-built waterfront estate valued at tens of millions, stretching across manicured grounds, palm-lined walkways, full privacy BMWs, resort-style pools, and interior spaces crafted with museum-level detail. Then there's the legend, the 56,000-square-foot Highland Park mansion in Illinois. Beyond the high-security gates stamped with his iconic 23, the estate unfolds like a world of its own. A full NBA regulation indoor court engineered to mimic the sound and bounce of Chicago Stadium, massive fitness center, tennis pavilion, outdoor infinity pool, climate-controlled garages, a custom cigar lounge, and handcrafted finishings that echo the 1990s era when he ruled the world. His world extends into a fleet of exotic cars that rival private museums: Ferraris, Porsches, Bentleys, McLarens, each customized, each a statement of victory. His watch collection is equally staggering: pieces from Richard Mille, Patek Philippe, Rolex, timepieces worth millions. Some released in quantities so limited they are spoken of like rare jewels. And towering above all is his Gulfstream G550 private jet, customized down to the stitching of its leather seats. A floating palace where deals are closed and peace replaces pressure. But the true cornerstone of his empire is business. The Jordan brand, born in 1985, has grown into a cultural phenomenon, generating billions every year, with Jordan personally earning royalties surpassing $150–200 million annually. His former ownership stake in the Charlotte Hornets delivered one of the greatest financial exits in sports ownership history. His NASCAR team, 23 Outboys Racing, pushes boundaries for representation and ambition in motorsports. Add investments in luxury tequila, cutting-edge tech companies, real estate ventures, energy, hospitality, and private equity. Jordan didn't just leave basketball, he conquered the world beyond it. And yet, despite the scale of his achievements, Michael's life today feels more grounded than ever. He spends more time at home, more time savoring dinners, conversations, sunsets, and the sound of small footsteps echoing through hallways. He chooses stillness over noise, privacy over spectacle, intention over pressure. Philanthropy has become another pillar of his legacy. He has donated and pledged hundreds of millions through foundations, community investments, scholarships, and social programs. Funding health clinics in underserved neighborhoods, supporting youth centers, fueling educational opportunities. For him, success without service is incomplete. And so the circle completes itself. From the boy who didn't make varsity, to the champion who dominated the planet, to the billionaire reshaping industries, to the father and husband who values peace more than applause. His life is not simply luxury, it is legacy. Not merely comfort, but meaning. Michael Jordan's story reminds us of what a human journey can become when it is shaped by resilience, discipline, and heart. He was doubted, rejected, broken, tested. Yet each time he found a way forward. His journey stands as a quiet reflection of how strength can grow in the very places where we once felt small. If this story moved you, feel free to tap like as a tribute to the spirit that turned struggle into greatness. And may you rise steadily from wherever you are, moving with the quiet discipline that keeps hope alive even on the hardest days. May you hold faith in who you can become. And may every step ahead bring you closer to the life you're meant to live.